Hey guys! Tonight we dive into the pungent, peculiar, and oddly satisfying world of medieval cheesemaking. You're not watching from the comfort of a modern kitchen. Nope, you're standing in a muddy yard at the edge of a medieval village, your boots already soaked through, and the only thing that smells worse than the pigs is, well, you actually, but that's part of the charm. There's no refrigeration here, no measuring spoons, no food, safety inspectors, just instinct, superstition, and a bucket full of frothy, unpasteurized milk. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun does again. No alarm clock needed, just the low moaning of a hungry cow and the insistent scratching of straw as something rodent-sized rummages near your feet. You sit up slowly, joints complaining like a rusty cartwheel, and pull on the same wool tunic you wore yesterday and the day before. The air is wet and cold, the kind that soaks into your bones without asking. Outside, the world is a blur of gray-blue fog. The grass glistens with dew. The fence posts drip with night rain, and the cow, your best milker, is already waiting. Her name is Magda. She is in no uncertain terms your boss. Magda regards you with a look that says, "You're late," though you're not. It's just that she's a cow, and cows have very little patience for human priorities. You approach with your dented tin bucket and your frayed milking stool. It wobbles like always, and you crouch down, setting the bucket beneath her. Warm milk hits the pail in rhythmic spurts. There's something almost hypnotic about the sound, like rain on a roof or distant applause. Your fingers grow numb quickly, and the chill of dawn seems to climb your spine no matter how tightly you wrap your shawl. You have to milk quickly because Magda doesn't enjoy standing still for long. She shifts, snorts, and swishes her tail with alarming accuracy. More than once, you've taken a tail to the face with a dollop of manure for good measure. It's a humble life, but if you don't fill this bucket, there'll be no cheese, and without cheese, there'll be no trade, no coin, no winter supplies. The village priest says, cheese is a gift from God. Your back says otherwise. Once the bucket is full, you balance it carefully as you head back across the muddy yard. Your younger brother offers to help, and then promptly trips over a rock. A splash of milk hits the ground. You say nothing but silently vow he'll do the mucking out tomorrow. Inside the cottage, the fire is already smoldering. You pour the warm milk through a coarse linen cloth stretched across a wide wooden bowl, catching stray hair's dust, and once a small beetle. The filtered milk goes into a clay crock that's seen better centuries. From here, the real work begins. You'll need enough milk to fill the crock to the brim, which means milking not just Magda, but her crankier cousin Bruna, who once broke your uncle's wrist with a surprise kick. Still, she's a high yielder. No one ever said cheesemaking was for the timid. Most days you gather milk twice, once at dawn, once at dusk. The morning milk is rich, almost buttery. The evenings is thinner, but still useful. Historians still argue whether it was better to combine both for flavor or let them sour separately. You, however, have no time for scholarly debates when there's mold to fight and rats to outrun. The milk is left to sit just long enough to grow warm beside the hearth. No thermometers here. You test it with a finger too hot, and the curds won't form. Too cold, and they'll take all day. You aim for slightly warmer than goat pee on your boot. A medieval benchmark no one talks about in textbooks. You cover the crock with a loose cloth to keep the flies out. Not that it really works, and set it in the corner to rest. This is the part where patience is supposed to take over. But you still have to fetch water-chopped kindling, mend your sister's socks, and argue with the neighbor about whose chickens got into whose garden, all while praying the cat doesn't knock over the crock again. It's happened. Twice. By evening, the cottage smells faintly of damp wool wood smoke and warm milk, a scent that might horrify a noblewoman, but to you, smells like survival. Tomorrow you'll start adding rennet cutting curds and pressing wheels, but tonight is about getting through the first and often messiest step of cheese making. simply collecting what nature gives and hoping your own body doesn't quit before the cows do. You trudge back to the cowshed before the sun even thinks about rising. There's a sliver of moon left hanging pale above the trees like a forgotten crust of bread. Everything is damp again. Your boots squelch with each step, and there's that distinctive smell of straw manure and animal breath hanging heavy in the air. Inside, it's warmer thanks to the sleepy huddle of cattle. Their breath fogs the shadows. Bruna, the cranky one, gives you side-eye as you set your stool beside her. She's still chewing last night's hay, eyeing you like you're the reason she didn't sleep well. And maybe you are. You forgot to latch the door properly, and a draft came through. She's a diva, with hooves. You mutter something that sounds like a prayer or maybe a warning and sit down. Milking is muscle memory now. Left hand, right hand, tug release. The rhythm is soothing like kneading dough or peeling root vegetables. But it's also hard work. Your fingers cramp before the bucket is even half full, and the cold air makes every joint ache like you're twice your age. Cows aren't statues either. Bruna kicks the bucket twice, though you manage to save it both times with a knee and some impressive balancing. You're starting to think her hooves have a mind of their own. Historians still argue whether medieval cattle were easier to manage than modern breeds. You'd like to invite them over for a test run. When the bucket is filled with warm, foamy milk, you hoist it carefully and walk back to the cottage, hugging it to your chest like it's a newborn. The milk sloshes a little. It's always a gamble. One misstep on a loose stone and hours of work spill into the dirt. And milk doesn't exactly grow on trees. Inside, your older sister has already started warming yesterday's milk by the hearth. She's been up longer than you have. She doesn't say much, just gives you a nod and reaches for your bucket. Together, you pour the milk into a wide wooden tub, straining it again through linen, just to catch anything the first filter missed. A beetle carcass floats by. You both ignore it. Next comes the settling. This isn't a fast process. The milk is covered with a cloth placed beside the fire and left to rest. You peek in every so often, like it's a baby napping, just to make sure the surface hasn't formed a skin or been tampered with by the cat. That cat, by the way, is named Mouse, which is exactly what he never catches. Some days the milk behaves. It thickens slightly sweet and creamy with a scent that's oddly comforting. Other days something goes wrong, a temperature drop, a cough from the fire, or a suspicious draft, and the milk turns sour. Not in the good way. In the throw this away before it walks off on its own kind of way. There's no fridge to hide your failures and no expiration date to blame. If the milk goes off, it's your fault. Or Bruna's. Possibly the cat's, but probably yours. You skim the surface for cream, collecting it with a carved spoon made from horn. Your aunt gave it to you after she lost her 2 front teeth to a wheel of overly ambitious cheese. Use your tools, not your teeth, she'd said. She also believed drinking milk on the new moon made your hair fall out. Fringe beliefs weren't exactly rare in the village. Once the cream is removed, the milk looks thinner, almost like watered-down paint. But don't be fooled. This is still good stuff. You've got to trust the process. That's what your grandmother always said right before she dropped a whole wheel of cheese down the root cellar stairs and swore loud enough to startle the hens. You take a sip from the ladle. It's still warm, still good. Not sweet like honey, but thick and earthy with a softness that lingers. A taste of the land itself, of Bruna's grass-fed resentment, of your aching hands and muddy boots. Cheese starts here, not in the curdling or the pressing, but in the soft hum of a cow, the glow of a hearth, and the quiet moments before the day truly begins. Even now, when you think about it, it's absurd that milk does this at all, that it can turn into something solid, something storable, something delicious. Back then, people didn't fully understand the chemistry. They just knew it worked. Usually, kind of. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants knew that the transformation from milk to curd was microbial magic or divine blessing. You say it's both. After you've milked the last cow and gathered the final pail, you line up the crocks in the corner of the cottage. Each one is slightly different. Some old and chipped, some new and too smooth. You whisper a little something over them. Not a spell exactly, more of a wish. That they thicken. That they behave. That you don't end up with a tub of slimy disappointment again. Outside the day finally arrives. Sunlight slinks through the trees, catching the rooflines of nearby cottages, setting everything aglow in gold and smoke. The smell of wood fires mingles with the scent of damp straw and warm milk. For a moment, you lean against the doorway, breathing it all in. It's going to be a long day. But if the milk settles right, if the cows don't revolt, the fire stays lit, and the cat minds its business, there might just be cheese by week's end. And if not, well, there's always butter. By now, the milk in the crocks has cooled to just the right warmth, somewhere between bathwater and soup left out too long. Not that you have a thermometer. You judge by touch and by instinct, and by watching how slowly the cream rises to the surface. It's a waiting game. You're learning patience whether you want to or not. You fetch the coarse linen cloths again. Some were your grandmother's table linens once before they got too stained for Sunday feasts. Now they're cheesecloths. Their purpose downgraded, but arguably more noble. You stretch one across a wide clay bowl and begin to pour. The milk streams slowly through, leaving behind any lurking bits of straw hay or floating fly carcasses. Don't flinch. You've seen worse. Like the time a toad managed to nest in the churn, and no one noticed until it hopped out mid-curdling. Historians still argue whether creatures like frogs and lizards were considered omens or just inconvenient guests. You're voting for the second. Straining milk is not glamorous work. The cloth drips endlessly and your arms ache from holding it taut. You tie the corners to a wooden peg above the hearth, letting it hang like a sad leaking pouch. Drip, drip, drip. It's the soundtrack of your afternoon. Once the milk's been filtered into smooth purity, you pour it carefully back into its crock, this time ready for the next step. Settling. Again. You've got to let it rest. Not just sit there, but truly settle. The cream floats upward in a lazy drift, forming a soft white layer on top. That's the good stuff. You'll skim it soon, unless your brother gets to it first and tries to use it as hair pomade. He did that once. Smelled like cheese for a week. Fashion has its costs. While it rests, you poke your head outside. The sun has risen high, and the village is alive with noise. Carts, creaking chickens, clucking children, screeching like they're being chased by wolves, or worse chores. A woman across the lane is shouting about someone stealing her eggs. Probably true. Eggs are worth more than gossip in a place like this. You go back inside and peek under the cloth. The surface of the milk has grown glossy, almost velvety. You skim the cream off gently with a broad spoon carved from ash wood, careful not to disturb the liquid below. This cream will be saved for other purposes, maybe churned into butter, maybe whisked into a stew if someone's feeling generous. The remaining milk, now defatted and faintly warm, waits for the big transformation. But it's still too soon. For now, you cover it again and set it closer to the hearth. The cottage is warm, filled with the scent of straw, old wood, and something faintly sour-sweet that you've come to associate with beginnings. In the meantime, there are other chores. Always. You refill the water jug from the well, your arms threatening to detach from your body with every step. You help your sister twist more linen cords for binding cheese molds. And then you chase the goat out of the yard, because for reasons known only to goats, it keeps trying to eat the firewood. Later, you sit on the cottage threshold, sharpening your butter paddle with a bit of stone. The grain of the wood catches on your thumb as you work. The sun throws long shadows across the ground. You think about tomorrow, about Renette, about curds and whey, and whether this batch will turn out better than the last. Cheese is fickle. Sometimes it listens, sometimes it sulks, and sometimes it grows green fuzz and smells like feet wrapped in despair. You remember a time not long ago when an entire wheel went wrong, cracked and bubbling with blisters that oozed clear liquid. Your aunt swore it was the fault of a passing comet. She said heavenly omens ruin dairy. You weren't sure, but nodded politely. Sometimes it's safer to agree with women who carry ladles like weapons. You step back inside. The milk is ready for its final settling. One last stir, one last sigh. It sits there heavy with promise. Cheese is still days away, but this moment, this quiet hour between the gathering and the curdling, is strangely sacred. It's not glamorous. It's not quick. It's not even particularly clean. But it's yours. And if the fire doesn't sputter out, and the cat doesn't knock over the crock, and the rennet behaves as it should, then soon you'll be stirring curds. And soon after that, you'll be pressing wheels. And someday, maybe not today, but soon you'll get to taste the reward. Now comes the part that still feels like witchcraft, even though you've done it a dozen times before. You fetch the rennet. It's kept in a tied pig's bladder hanging by the door, hardly the sort of thing you'd show off to guests if you had any. Inside that shriveled pouch is a strip of dried calf stomach soaked in brine and strong enough to curdle milk into something barely recognizable. The idea of it still turns your stomach a little. Who first discovered that the inside of a baby cow's gut could do this? Historians still debate whether it was a mistake or a flash of brilliance brought on by desperation and a lack of refrigeration. You suspect it was both. You untie the pouch, pinch your nose, and add a few drops of rennet-infused liquid into the crock of milk. Just a few, too much, and you'll end up with cheese that tastes like a tannery. Too little and the curds won't form, and you'll be left with a sad milky soup that mocks your efforts. You stir slowly using your horn spoon, not in circles, but with deliberate up and down motions like you're folding secrets into the milk. The hearth crackles nearby. You whisper a little something under your breath. Not a spell, not really just a plea to the gods of dairy. You've learned the hard way. Cheese doesn't like arrogance. The milk must rest again now, completely undisturbed. No jostling the table, no stomping near the hearth. You once ruined a whole batch because your cousin decided to practice cartwheels across the floorboards. Never again. You tell everyone in the house to sit down and be quiet or better, yet go outside and argue with the chickens. The next hour is a lesson in stillness. You occupy yourself by slicing herbs for dinner, re-wrapping old cheeses in cloth, and cleaning your tools with care. The ladle, the horn spoon, the linen, all of it must be spotless. If anything smells off, it could ruin everything. When you check back, the magic has begun. The surface of the milk no longer trembles like a liquid. Instead, it shivers with resistance when you nudge the pot gently. It has gelled, formed a single smooth layer, pale and custard soft. You press a finger lightly against it and watch the imprint remain. It's ready. You slice through it. You take your curd knife, or more likely your slightly sharpened wooden slat, and begin to cut the set milk into small cubes. First lengthwise, then across, and finally diagonally. Each cut allows the whey to start separating. The cubes wobble in the pot like jelly, releasing a yellowish liquid that smells faintly sour. Curd cutting is strangely satisfying. There's a rhythm to it. A gentle motion, like rocking a baby or washing clothes in the stream. You stir the curds slowly now, gently heating the pot beside the fire, until the curds firm just slightly, not too hot, not too long. You test the firmness by pressing one between your fingers. If it squeaks, it's just about right. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers had consistent curd sizes, or if each household developed their own chaotic style. Judging by your neighbors, you suspect the latter. Old Marga across the lane makes cheese that looks like it's been punched into submission. Yours at least still has dignity. As the curds separate more and more from the whey, the yellow liquid begins to rise. It smells stronger now, almost like sour bread. You don't waste it, of course. Nothing is wasted. Some of the whey will go to the pigs. Some will be used to soak grain. And some on very desperate days will be drunk, though it tastes like a foot had a fever dream. Still, protein is protein. You line a wide willow basket with clean cloth and begin to scoop the curds into it. The whey dribbles out between the gaps in the weave, leaving behind a soft, soggy mass of curdled glory. You press down gently with your hands, feeling it give under your palms like warm dough. The scent is creamy and sour and somehow alive. The basket sags under the weight, but you tie the cloth ends over the top and hang it from a ceiling hook to drain. There, it sways like a ghost in the rafters, dripping steadily into a basin below. You sit down nearby with your feet by the firearms, aching back sore and hands still damp with whey. It's been a full day already and the cheese isn't even close to done. You listen to the dripping curds and watch the shadows grow long against the cottage walls. The process is messy, humble, wobbly sometimes, but it's real. And when that first wheel finally takes shape, dense and heavy and impossibly fragrant, you'll know that you made it happen. With rennet and cloth and patience and prayers, and maybe a little help from the cow. The curds have drained overnight, their soft bulk pressing into itself as gravity worked its slow magic. By morning, the cloth is damp, but no longer dripping, and what rests inside the bundle is something dense and slightly spongy, like a sleepy sponge that smells faintly of sour cream and wet hay. You untie the linen carefully. The curds have knit together, holding their shape but still wobbling a little. Like pudding wearing armor, you lift the mass into your hands, marveling for the 1000th time that milk, gentle, runny, innocent milk, could become something so solid and strange. Next comes the cutting. Again, you place the curd on a flat wooden board dampened slightly so it won't stick, and begin to slice it into smaller blocks. Not too small, just enough so the pieces can be stirred again. You need to get more whey out. This cheese still has too much water in it, and water doesn't age well. The sliced curds go back into a bowl lined with fresh cloth. You stir them gently, adding a little hot whey or water from the hearth to keep things warm. Not boiling, never boiling. That ruins everything. You're aiming for that lukewarm baby bath temperature again. An odd thing to aim for when you've never seen a bathtub. You stir with care, feeling the resistance in the curds grow. They firm up slightly, clumping and shrinking as more whey seeps out. The bowl fills with liquid again, yellow and sharp-scented, and you drain it off once more, over and over. Stir, drain, wait. Eventually, the curds are ready for their final press. You gather the pieces and place them into wooden molds, some round, some blocky, some carved with the family's mark or a cross. Just in case a wandering saint feels like blessing your dairy goods today. The molds are lined with cloth, and you pack the curds inside firmly. Not crammed, not mashed, but encouraged. Like tucking someone into a very uncomfortable bed. Then comes the pressing. You place smooth stones, river-worn and heavy, on top of each mold. Some are tied down with cords, others weighted with iron pots, or anything heavy and vaguely symmetrical. The curds let out a slow sigh as they're pressed, and more whey dribbles out, staining the cloth a deeper yellow. You watch for a while, not because anything exciting is happening, but because cheese pressing is one of those things that demands a kind of reverence, like tending a fire or watching bread rise. You're not doing much, but you're witnessing something. Transformation. Slow, steady, slightly smelly transformation. Historians still debate how uniform medieval cheese molds were. Some say every village had its own signature shape. Others claim it was complete chaos. You believe both, especially after seeing what your uncle calls a wheel, which looks suspiciously like a misshapen boot. As the wheels press, you clean up. You scrub the bowls and rinse the cloths and set the spoons to dry. The air smells sharp now, acidic with whey and lingering rennet. It's not unpleasant exactly, just strong. Like the cheese is marking its territory already. Outside, the day is growing long. You step into the sun for a moment, stretching your arms, letting the heat soak into your bones. Your back aches. Your fingers are pruny. There's a small burn on your wrist from bumping the kettle. You are in every way exhausted. But you made curds today. You shaped something. And now, as the wheels press beneath their stones, you feel something settle inside yourself too. Later, you'll check the wheels, flip them over in their molds, and replace the stones. You'll watch the whey continue to ooze slowly, inevitably, until the cheese is as firm as it's going to get. And then, you'll unmold them, gently, reverently. You'll peel back the cloth and hold the finished round in your hands like it's treasure. It's still pale now, still damp, still far from edible, but it's cheese. The beginning of it anyway, and you did it. You press your thumb into the edge of one wheel. It leaves a faint impression. That's okay. It'll firm up in the cellar. For now, you set it aside on a clean board and breathe in the scent of everything that brought you here. Warm milk, cold mornings, tired hands, and the stubborn belief that something simple can still be worth everything. Now comes the part most folk forget about getting rid of the whey. The curds get all the glory, but that yellowish liquid, there's buckets of it. You could drown a village mouse in it and still have enough left over to fill your brother's shoes, which incidentally he once did on a dare. The smell has never left them. You ladle out the whey, carefully tipping the molds just slightly to coax the last dribbles free. It trickles down into bowls, then gets dumped into a slop pail bound for the pigs. They love it, especially when it's still warm. You try not to think too hard about how it steams in the trough. Your job is done once it leaves the cottage. Let the pigs philosophize over its flavor. You take the pressed wheels firm now but still a little squishy and set them on wooden boards. Each is flipped gently, the cloth peeled back and the mold removed. The cheese is pale, the color of oat porridge, and a little wet on the surface. You pat it dry with a scrap of linen and let it breathe. Then it's time to really press the life out of it. You return the wheels to clean cloths, place them back in the molds and reweight them, this time heavier. Bigger stones, or bricks if you've got them. One neighbor uses a cast iron skillet filled with scrap metal. You once saw someone press cheese using a pile of religious texts, which raised eyebrows in 3 parishes. This stage lasts longer, several hours, sometimes overnight. The curds groan a little under the pressure, just as you did carrying water from the well this morning. But with each hour, the whey trickles less. The shape becomes tighter. The wheel becomes real. Historians still debate whether medieval cheesemakers measured this stage by time or texture. Some say it was judged by feel alone. Press until the wheel sounds hollow. Others claim pressing was determined by a song's length or the time it took to pray the rosary. You suspect it depended more on how much daylight was left and how many chores still awaited. Once the cheese is firm enough to stand on its own, you remove the weights. You hold a wheel in both hands and feel its weight heavier than a loaf of bread, lighter than a baby, just right for stacking. You give it a little tap. It answers with a soft thud. Not bad. Then you arrange them, all 3, maybe 4 wheels from today's work on the windowsill. Not to cure yet, just to dry. You tilt the shutters open and let the breeze do its job. The air is warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and manure and something faintly sweet. You watch the sunlight catch on the damp surface of the cheese, and for a brief moment they shine like little round moons sweating in the sun. The drying takes all day. You turn them every hour or so, letting each side face the warmth. If a fly lands, you wave it off. If the cat climbs up for a sniff, you hiss. If your brother tries to poke one with a stick, you threaten to tell your mother about the thing he buried behind the chicken coop. The wheels begin to firm up on the outside. The surfaces lose their tacky sheen. The smell changes too, less milk, more hay, earthier, slightly sour. This stage is delicate. If you let them dry too fast, the rinds crack. Too slow and mold comes early. The balance, as always, lies in your attention. By nightfall, they're ready for their next home, the cellar. You wrap each one in a clean cloth, stack them into a wicker basket padded with straw, and light a small tallow candle. Down the stairs, you go into the cool, damp dark. The cellar smells like potatoes, damp stone, and history. It's not pleasant, but it is familiar. You brush aside a cobweb and make room on the curing shelf. Each wheel is placed gently, like putting a sleeping baby to bed, or more accurately, like laying out small edible bricks of gold. You'll turn them every day now. Monitor them, brush them, salt them, scold them if necessary. But for tonight, you close the cellar door, blow out the candle, and climb the stairs with arms empty and shoulders sore. You've made it to the end of whey and into the beginning of cheese. The air in the cellar is cooler than anywhere else in the cottage, moist still and tinged with a faint scent of old root vegetables and wet stone. It's the perfect place to forget things. Apples that shrivel, onions that sprout, and cheeses that grow into something utterly unrecognizable unless you keep a close eye. You lower your basket to the stone shelf and begin unwrapping the cloth from each wheel. They're drier now, holding their shape firmly. You run a finger across the rind. It gives just slightly. The surface is smooth in some places, a little wrinkled in others. That's fine. That's cheese. Now it's time to salt. You reach into a sack of coarse salt gathered last autumn from the nearest coastal market, traded for beans and barley, and a pair of your brother's shoes he insists he outgrew. The salt is chunky and damp. Perfect. You sprinkle it over the first wheel, rubbing it in with slow circles. Not too much, not too little. You massage it into the rind down the edges across the top and bottom. The salt helps dry the surface and draw out any lingering whey. It also discourages things from growing that shouldn't, like fur. Historians still argue whether salt was used consistently across all cheese-making regions. Some say inland peasants used dried herbs or even ashes instead, especially when salt was too expensive. You've tried all three. Salt works best. Ash makes your cheese look like a burned potato. And herbs. Well, once a mouse nested in a sage wheel, and that was the end of that. You repeat the process with each cheese rubbing, rubbing again. It's a quiet task, but satisfying. The wheels begin to develop a texture firmer on the outside like a shell, while the inside stays soft for now. Once salted, the cheeses must rest. This is the long game. You arrange them with care on wooden boards that have been used for years, maybe generations. They smell intense. A kind of sharp, socky, fermented funk that no longer offends you. If anything, it smells like success. Over the coming days and weeks, you'll flip each wheel daily. You'll wipe off moisture with cloth. You'll look for signs, mold spots, cracks, wet patches. You'll press a fingertip into the rind, waiting for that moment when it no longer yields. When it feels like stone from the outside, but inside it's still creamy, tangy life. You return upstairs where the smell of porridge clings to the beams. Outside, the rain has started again, a steady, soaking drizzle that flattens the paths and drips from the eaves like a broken pipe. The perfect weather for aging cheese. Damp but not swampy. Cool but not cold. You think of your cheeses resting below, waiting, changing. The idea that cheese simply is a thing that you take milk and through some miracle get wheels of dense, nourishing food is laughable. It's not a thing. It's a process, a slow metamorphosis, like watching mud become pottery, or children become adults, or a cabbage become soup. And like all such transformations, it requires watchfulness. The next morning, you return to the cellar with a small lantern. The light flickers across the shelves as you check each wheel. The rinds are drying nicely. One has a little white bloom on the edge. That's good mold. Encouraging. You brush it gently with a damp cloth to help it spread evenly. Another has a suspicious dark spot. You cut it away and scowl. Your aunt swears by rubbing the wheels with beer to prevent bad mold. You've tried it. Once. The cheese ended up tasting like regret and barley, but it kept the mold off, so maybe there's something to it. Some households smear their wheels with ash from the hearth, or even a paste made from crushed nettles. Some add herbs like thyme or lavender. You once accidentally pressed a wheel on top of a sprig of rosemary. The result? Strange, but oddly pleasant. You called it shepherd's surprise. It sold well at market, though one buyer claimed it made his nose itch for a week. As the wheels cure, they lose moisture. They shrink, slightly tighten, concentrate. Their scent sharpens. And their personalities emerge. Yes, personalities. Some wheels stay smooth and quiet. Others bubble up with odd patterns or develop a rind so thick you need a hammer to break it. One wheel in particular, Old Tom smelled like cooked cabbage and rage. But when you finally sliced it open, it was buttery and mild inside, like a soft-spoken farmer with very angry eyebrows. You whisper to them sometimes, not out of madness, but out of habit. You ask how they're doing, whether they need more air, whether they dream of figs and oatcakes. Because really, what else are you going to do while crouched in a damp cellar brushing mold off something that used to be milk? You take one last look at your shelves and smile. Cheese is coming. You step back from the cellar shelf and wipe your hands on your apron, the scent of salt and cheese clinging to your skin like perfume for someone who's never heard of roses. The wheels are aging well, quietly, steadily, but they're not finished yet. Now comes the phase where you meddle the most, and the cheese resents you for it. Each day you return with your cloths, brushes, and an ever-deepening suspicion that one wheel is growing a conscience. You know the one, it leans ever so slightly to the left, develops odd patterns, and once tried to fuse to the shelf. You've nicknamed it the monk, because it smells like an abbey's underrobes and insists on solitude. Your first task is rubbing down the rinds. You use a stiff brush handmade from bristles bound in linen cord and scrape off the soft white bloom forming on the surface. It flakes away like dust drifting into the air and onto your sleeves. You try not to inhale. Nothing says I love my job like sneezing cheese spores. You flip each wheel as you go inspecting both sides. Some rinds feel damp and sticky. Others have dried into rough, leathery skins. One has a small crack. You dab it with a paste made from old curds and salt patching it like a peasant band-aid. Some wheels begin to grow blue veins near the surface. That's fine. Encouraged even. Blue cheese wasn't always intentional in medieval times. It was often the result of an especially damp cave or a nearby loaf of moldy bread. Historians still debate whether early cheesemakers embraced the mold or simply didn't have the heart to throw it out. In your case, you've learned to lean into it. One moldy accident turned into your most requested wheel at market. You named it Stormbirth. To encourage flavor and discourage the wrong sorts of mold, you sometimes rub the rinds with brine. Other times a mixture of whey and herbs. Occasionally ale. One wheel gets special treatment. A twice-daily rub with crushed nettle and ash. It stings your hands but gives the cheese a dusky, earthy flavor that's somehow both bold and apologetic. The monks at the nearby abbey are the real masters of this phase. They age cheeses the size of cartwheels stacked in rows like heavenly books. They hum psalms as they rub them, a practice you tried once, but abandoned after a neighbor peeked in and asked if you were summoning spirits. Still, you steal a few of their tricks, like wrapping certain wheels in cloth soaked with herb-infused brine, or storing them on beds of straw to encourage airflow. You don't have marble cellars or rows of candlelit shelves, but you do have patience, and that's almost as good. The smell in the cellar is ripening. No longer just sour milk or salt. Now it's something deeper, musky rich. A smell that sits on your tongue even when you're not eating. You come back upstairs and people flinch slightly, unsure whether you've bathed in broth or spent the day in a particularly expressive barn. Your mother says you smell like a market stall in July. You take it as a compliment. Days turn to weeks. The wheels firm more and more. You tap one and hear a satisfying thud. Another, when sliced open, reveals a creamy center with the faintest tang. Not ready yet, but getting close. You resist the urge to taste too soon. Cutting too early can ruin the aging dry the inside, and worst of all, leave you with a crumbly mess instead of a creamy marvel. You start marking the days with notches on the cellar door, one for each flip, each rub, each breath held when a wheel developed a suspicious bloom. The door is now a calendar of your obsession. Your younger brother begins referring to the cellar as your second home. Your older sister starts asking if you plan to marry one of the wheels. You don't dignify that with a response, though. To be fair, the monk has aged better than most of the village bachelors. Then comes a quiet afternoon weeks in, where you pull open the cellar door, step down the cool stone steps, and catch that smell. Not just milk, not just mold, but cheese. Real cheese. Sharp, warm, tangy, like the air itself is trying to spread on bread. You pause. You breathe. You smile. Some of the wheels are nearly ready. You wrap your best wheel in a clean cloth, tie it with a bit of dyed twine, and carry it upstairs like it's your firstborn. You place it on the table, cut it open, and marvel at the creamy, dense center. You taste a sliver. It's astonishing. A little bite from the rind, a soft, nutty middle, a faint echo of the cellar in every chew. You close your eyes and taste months of work, of aching arms and cold mornings, of spills and prayers and whispered curses and quiet victories. Cheese. Not just food, not just preservation. This is art made with a bucket of cow and a refusal to give up. The wheel you just tasted, sharp, creamy, stubborn, is now your gold standard. You'll never forget its flavor. You'll spend years chasing it. But you can't eat it all yourself. Not unless you want to live in blessed, stinky solitude. So now it's time to sell. The sun hasn't yet cleared the treetops when you rise the next morning. You pack the cheeses into a padded basket lined with hay and linen scraps. The wheels sit neatly, their rinds slightly waxy and darkened from days in the cellar. You wrap them one by one, tucking them like loaves of bread into your bag. You carry your bundle through the village toward the market square. The road is rutted and wet, and a chicken tries to trip you halfway there. You kick off the worst of the mud at the gate and brace yourself. Because it's not just about making cheese, It's about convincing someone else that your cheese is better than the 12 other wheels stacked 2 stalls down. You find a spot beside the woman who sells onions and the man who always smells of goose fat. You unfold your cloth, arrange your wheels, and wait. You've brought 4. 1 aged 2 middling, and 1 that's probably not quite ready but still edible if you cut it right. The first buyer is a reeve, thin, scowling, and suspicious of everything. He picks up a wheel, sniffs, it pokes it, then squints at you as if you've named it after his mother. Full weight, he asks. You nod. He narrows his eyes. He lifts the wheel again like it might bite him, then finally nods and places a copper coin in your palm. Just 1. You smile politely even though you're screaming inside. That cheese took 3 weeks and a cracked fingernail to produce. You could have charged 2. Historians still debate whether peasants haggled or accepted the first offer at market. You know the truth. You always haggle, but you pretend to be offended if someone else does it first. By mid-morning, you've sold 2 wheels. 1 went to a merchant's cook who tasted it and said, "This one doesn't cry in your mouth like the last batch." You took that as praise. Another wheel you traded for 2 bundles of wool and a jar of something the vendor claimed was elderberry preserve, but smells suspiciously like turnip wine. The remaining wheels you tuck back into the basket, not because they're bad, but because you'll need them for winter, or to trade later, or maybe to eat yourself. You spend the rest of market day walking the stalls. There's salted fish from the coast, smoked eels, dyed threads, and a fiddler playing a song so sad it makes a baby cry 2 stalls over. A boy tries to steal a cheese nub off your board. You slap his hand gently and hand him the rind instead. He grins and disappears like a mouse in boots. You stop by the abbey stand. The monks have brought their cheeses of course wheels so perfectly round and evenly aged, you suspect divine intervention. You trade them a small sample of yours. They nod, chew thoughtfully, then whisper among themselves. One monk leans forward. "We might age this one a little longer," he says. "It has potential." You beam. That's the closest thing to a compliment you'll ever get from a man in sandals who lives on barley soup. By the time you trudge home, your feet are sore, your coin purse slightly heavier, and your back is singing a slow ballad of regret. But you're content. You unload what you've earned, set the remaining cheeses back into the cellar, and sit down at the hearth with a heel of bread, a cup of water, and a thin wedge of your own wheel. The flavor has changed since this morning. Just slightly. It's warmer now, Tangier. It tastes of wood smoke and cold stone and all the hours you spent crouched over a bucket. You chew slowly, eyes closed. Later, your neighbor stops by. She's heard you sold at market. She asks if you'll teach her daughter how to make cheese. You say yes, because that's how knowledge passes on here. Not in books, not in scribbled parchment, but in footsteps, burned fingers, and sloshed buckets. You begin to think about tomorrow's milk. The cows won't wait. Neither will the cellar, and certainly not the mold. But for now, you lean back. Let the fire crackle beside you and chew the last bite slowly, because this isn't just food. This is what you built. 1 drip, 1 curd, 1 wheel at a time. You wake the next morning to the smell of damp linen and something else. Something sharp and musty and a little alarming. You sit up, sniff again, and groan. It's the cellar. You throw on your cloak, grab a lantern, and descend the stone steps, each one creaking with damp. The air thickens the deeper you go, like walking through an old sponge. You reach the shelves, hold up your flickering light, and there it is. Mold. Not the good kind. This mold is black, green, and fuzzy, blooming like a nightmare across one of your middling wheels. It clings to the rind in patches like moss on a wet wall. You groan again, louder this time, because you just flipped that wheel yesterday. It was fine. Now it looks like a hedgehog caught a fever. You sigh, set the lantern down, and get to work. First isolation. You lift the offending wheel onto a separate board, wrinkling your nose as you do. It squelches. Not a good sign. Second cleanup. You take a fresh cloth and dampen it with brine. Then you scrub slowly, firmly, carefully, wiping the rind until the fuzz gives way to the solid surface beneath. You scrape off a layer just to be safe. The interior seems untouched, thank the saints. You whisper a few choice words under your breath. Not curses exactly, just colorful opinions. Historians still debate whether medieval cheesemakers viewed mold as enemy or ally. The monks certainly embraced it. Some of their best wheels are barely visible beneath blooms of white and blue. But villagers, we were more skeptical. Mold meant something had gone too far. Or worse, you weren't paying attention. You turned the other wheels with more care than usual, inspecting every inch. A few have mild spots brushable, manageable. One seems to be developing a small crack along the bottom. You note it with a chalk mark. Tomorrow you'll rub it with butter and salt. A trick passed down from your grandmother who claimed cracked cheese was the devil's door. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you're not going to risk it. You pull out your knife and cut open the half-rescued wheel. The rind peels back like old bark, but the interior is surprisingly smooth, pale ivory. You nibble a piece, tangy sharp with a hint of damp stone. Not ruined, not yet. Still, it reminds you, cheese doesn't just age, it battles. Against rot, against air, against the chaos of time. You reseal the wheel in fresh cloth and mark it with charcoal. If it turns again, it'll go to the pigs. You won't risk someone's health over a stubborn curd. Outside, it's raining again. The kind of slow, endless rain that seeps through everything and makes straw smell like old socks. Perfect mold weather. You spend the rest of the morning rotating the shelves top to bottom, inner to outer, trying to equalize the air and moisture. You crack open the cellar's tiny window just an inch, hoping to coax in a draft. You whisper to the wheels as you go. Behave. Not you, monk. You're fine. Later, back upstairs, your sister tells you the reeve asked about another wheel. You shake your head. Not this week, you mutter. They're misbehaving. She laughs. Like children. Exactly. You think about that as you scrub your hands in a basin of warm water, about how every wheel has its moods. Some cure quietly, others rebel. One you once found halfway rolled off the shelf, caught only by a hook of wicker. That one became Houdini. It sold well, maybe out of respect. By evening, you've made the rounds again. The cellar smells stronger now. Not bad, just more assertive. Like it knows you're paying attention. You cut a sliver from one of the good wheels just to be sure. The rind gives with a satisfying crackle. The inside is buttery and sweet, balanced. You chew slowly, thoughtfully. Not every batch is perfect. Some go wrong. Some get saved. Some teach you things you didn't know you needed to learn. And in the end, all you can do is watch, wait, and work. Cheese doesn't lie. It just waits to tell you the truth. A week later, the cellar is calm again. No fresh mold blooms, no cracked rinds. No cheese wheels trying to roll off into freedom. You exhale like someone who's been holding tension in their shoulders since birth. The battle's not over, but for now, your cheeses are behaving. Mostly. You spend the morning preparing for the next market. This one's special, a feast day fair. The bishop is rumored to be visiting, which means noble soldiers, and most importantly, rich mouths, looking to chew something foreign and firm. You select your wheels carefully. One aged and sharp enough to start arguments. One young and creamy, and one experimental blend. You've named Goat Whisper. You rub each wheel with a clean cloth, dust off any fuzz, and wrap them in cloths dyed with beetroot and elderberry for color. You tie them with linen twine. Presentation matters when selling to people who think forked hats are fashionable. On market day, you rise before the sun and load your basket with the reverence of a pilgrim carrying relics. The village is already stirring. You pass others dragging barrels, balancing trays of pies, and hauling squawking geese in crates. You nod to the bread seller and trade a wedge of cheese for a still warm rye loaf. Fair is fair. The market is alive. Bright ribbons flutter from stalls. Smoke wafts from roasting meat. Children dart between legs, laughing sticky-faced and barefoot. And the bishop's guards tall and humorless patrol as though someone might assassinate the sausage vendor. You set up your stall and lay out your cheeses. A noblewoman walks by, sniffs, and mutters something about barnyard aromas. You smile sweetly and offer her a sample of your aged wheel. She takes it, chews, pauses, and then takes 3 more. Victory! Soon after, the bishop's steward arrives, a man with a beard like a thatched roof, and an expression that suggests he hasn't smiled since the last harvest moon. He inspects your wheels like a jeweler examining rubies. You let him quietly, praying he doesn't notice the faint crack on Houdini's cousin. He doesn't. He buys 2 wheels and pays in silver. Silver. You nearly faint. Historians still argue how much profit a medieval cheesemaker could make. Some claim peasants barely scraped by, while others say cheese was a minor luxury item with high trade value. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between, especially after watching 2 grown men nearly come to blows over your last herb-rubbed wheel. As the day winds down, you're left with a single cheese and more coin than usual. You trade the leftover for beeswax candles and a small wool pouch embroidered with a fox. It's frivolous. You love it. You head home tired, dusty, but elated. Your basket is empty. Your cloak smells like roast mutton and ash, and your feet feel like boiled turnips. Still, you're smiling. Back at the cottage, your sister counts the coin while you slice the bread and open the cellar. The wheels resting there feel familiar now, like friends, old, slightly smelly friends with thick skins and soft hearts. You sit beside the fire, nibble a heel of bread with a chunk of your youngest wheel, and marvel again at how it all begins with milk. Milk and time, and effort, and accidents, and weather. And whatever mood your cow is in, cheese is never just cheese. It's everything that happens in between. It's the missed curfew because you were flipping a wheel in the dark. It's the neighbor who traded her last carrot for a wedge. It's the mouse who chewed through your cloth and gave your wheel a cratered rind that customers now call rustic. It's the little girl who tried her first bite and called it butter that bites back. It's all of it. And now, with the sun down the fire crackling and your stomach full, you think, tomorrow you start a new batch. Different milk, new weather, a new chance. And maybe, just maybe, the next wheel will be better. The weather turns. The skies darken early and the wind changes from soft and teasing to sharp and insistent. Leaves scatter like frightened hens across the path. As you walk to the cow, shed your cloak flapping like a sail behind you. Magda the cow is already grumpy about the chill. She swats her tail harder, stomps more, breathes, steam like a dragon. The milk changes too. Thicker some mornings, thinner others. The grass has changed with the season, and the cow's diet shapes the curd more than most people realize. You taste it before you even stir in the rennet. Subtle changes. Yes, but they're there. Less sweet, more earthy. Autumn milk has its own voice. You begin another batch. You can't stop just because the leaves fall or the wind howls. Cheese doesn't care about your comfort. It only wants your attention. This batch sets slower than expected. You test the milk with a finger. It trembles, but doesn't break. You wait longer. Too long. When you cut the curd, it's overly soft, like warm custard trying to be brave. You stir anyway, gently whispering apologies to the pot. Sometimes you swear the milk can hear you. You hang the curds to drain, but the cloth slips and a corner dips into the way. You catch it just in time, but the damage is done. That batch may be sour by morning. You hang it anyway because there's no going back. Historians still debate whether medieval cheesemaking had hard rules, or if trial and error was the true tradition. You don't need parchment records to know the answer. Error is half the job. The next morning, the curds are tangier than usual, but firm. You press them anyway. You've learned to live with imperfection, to work with what you're given. You press the wheel harder than usual, hoping to coax strength from inside it. As it dries, you notice cracks near the edge. Not gaping, just surface flaws. You rub them with salt and patch them with softened curd paste. You set it aside not for market, but for the cottage. Family cheese. Flawed but still worthy. Not everything you make is meant to be sold. Some wheels are meant to be broken into over stew, eaten with muddy fingers after digging carrots from frozen soil. Some are shared with neighbors over sad news or long stories. Some are held in reserve for the midwinter feast when light is scarce and food is measured. Cheese is your food bank, your celebration, your apology, your offering. You remember last winter, the storm that closed roads for a week. The fields buried in snow, the root cellar nearly empty, and the single-aged wheel you'd forgotten in the back, wrapped in a linen soaked in ale hard as a saint's elbow and sharp enough to wake the dead. You carved it like stone. It tasted like survival. So you press another wheel now, and another, even the cracked ones, especially the cracked ones. You begin to notice the cellar filling again, row by row, board by board. Some wheels are named Monk Houdini Old Tom. Others are marked only with chalk symbols, spirals, stars, crosses. You rotate them weekly, brush them, whisper to them. You are no longer just making cheese. You are curating a memory, because each wheel holds a season, a particular pasture, a specific moment. That hot day when the fire wouldn't light. The morning Bruna kicked the bucket straight across the yard. The time your brother brought back thistle blossoms and said, "Try adding these." You did. It was terrible. But memorable. You begin a journal of sorts. Scratched notes into the wood by the cellar door. Ash wheel turned soft burned crust. Brined goat mix too squeaky. Aged for market perfect crack. It's not elegant, but it's record enough. You're starting to know what works. And what doesn't. And when to trust your hands over any recipe. You taste a piece from an earlier batch. It's firm now with a nutty warmth and just enough bite. It lingers on your tongue like a story not finished. You nod. This one will go to market. And maybe it'll end up on a noble's plate paired with wine and scandal passed around on a silver tray. Or maybe it'll land in the hands of a boy who's never tasted anything but turnips and porridge. Either way, it will be eaten. And that's enough. Snow comes early this year. It starts as flurries, then sheets, then solid white walls that blanket the thatched roofs and silence the village. Even the chickens go quiet. You wake to a cottage colder than a confession booth and pull on every layer you own before you open the door. The wind bites like a tax collector. Inside the cowshed, the air is thick with breath and straw. Magda and Bruna grumble as you trudge in with your bucket. Their coats are dusted with frost, and Bruna has already stomped a new hole in the fence. Of course, the milk is thinner now, less rich, more watery. The cows aren't grazing, they're fed hay, and hay doesn't produce the creamy dream milk of springtime. Still, it's enough, just enough. You don't stop in winter. You can't. Cheese is food, yes, but it's also preservation. It's insurance. A promise you made to your future self that you wouldn't starve, come frostbite and famine. So you work. The curds take longer to set in the cold, so you warm the crocks closer to the fire. You press the wheels longer, turn them more frequently, check for frost in the cellar corners. You even begin storing small wrapped cheeses in the chimney nook not too close to the flame, just near enough to keep their cores from freezing. It's a delicate dance. One misstep and a wheel cracks clean through. One moment too close to the fire and the rind weeps fat like a roasted bird. But you manage. Mostly. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants made cheese year-round or only during the lush months. You scoff every time you hear that. You've never had the luxury of stopping. If the cows give milk, you make cheese, even if your hands are blue and your breath fogs the curd. You trade one wheel at the winter market, a small firm round with a split down the side passed off as artisan flair. You get 3 onions, half a candle, and a strip of salted pork in return. Fair enough. One neighbor offers you a deal, his wife's mittens in exchange for a young wheel. You agree? The mittens are too large but warm. And his wife calls your cheese surprisingly edible, which is as close to praise as you'll get from her. One day, a monk knocks on your door. He's soaked, shivering, and holding a small wrapped bundle. Inside, a wedge of their best winter wheel, blue-veined and wrapped in waxed linen. He says we made too much. You know it's a lie. Monks never make too much. But you take it and hand him one of your aged rounds in return. Later, you taste it by the fire. It's bold, salty, smells like a cold stone floor. You love it, and your own. The one you traded probably won't win any feasts, but it's firm and honest. Like you use the scraps to make pottage shavings and rinds tossed into barley stew until it thickens like glue. The family slurps it gratefully, even your brother who once claimed he didn't trust food that changes shape. The cellar grows quieter. Half the wheels are gone now, eaten, traded, given away. The rest sit in the cold waiting. You check them weekly now, not daily. You know them better. They don't need your hand quite so often. Some look tired, rinds darkening shapes slumping. That's okay. You do too. One wheel forgotten in the far back corner is now blackened with mold. You chip it open expecting rot, but inside it's golden, soft, aromatic, like earth and candle smoke and something oddly sweet. You taste it. It's incredible. An accident. A miracle. A reward for leaving something alone. You wrap it in cloth market with a chalk star and call it Winterborn. You don't know when you'll eat it. Not yet. Maybe the first thaw. Maybe the darkest night. Maybe when someone needs it more than you do. Because cheese is sustenance, yes. But sometimes, it's mercy. The snow begins to melt. Not quickly. Not all at once. But in slow drips from the eaves in puddles forming in muddy wheel ruts in the way the frost no longer clings to your breath when you step outside. Spring is thinking about returning. It hasn't made a firm commitment, but you can feel it in the way the cows start shifting earlier in the morning. Magda's milk is creamier again just slightly. You notice because your hands have memorized the feel of her. This new milk carries hints of green like grass remembered not yet eaten. A whisper of butter in every pull. You begin a fresh batch working by the light of longer mornings and the hum of birds reappearing in the hedges. The curds set faster now. The air is softer. The cat, unbothered for weeks, has resumed staring longingly at the crock, as though it's plotting a heist. But while the new batch begins, you haven't forgotten the old wheels. Back in the cellar, the survivors of winter rest like buried treasure. Winterborn still sits at the back, waiting for a moment you haven't yet decided on. Houdini's cousin surprisingly has aged well. And the monk. Oh. The monk now has a rind so firm and musky that even the cellar mice keep their distance. You're proud of that one. He's your little hermit. You've also noticed something strange. One of your midwinter wheels has developed a fine, almost silver fuzz. Not bad mold. Not good either. Just strange. You cut it open. Inside, it's slightly sweet. Mild, tender, and unexpectedly floral. You taste it, then wrap it tightly, scribble Fairweather on the cloth, and vow to try it again in a few weeks. Historians still debate whether peasants named their cheeses. Probably not. But then again, historians didn't spend months alone with wheels that felt more loyal than neighbors. When you spend every day brushing mold off a lump of milk that refuses to die, you get attached. And besides, names give them story. Memory. You pack a few wheels for the next market. Not many, just what you can carry in your sling and satchel. This isn't a big fair, just a gathering of traders and townsfolk, most of them hungry from the lean season. They want something rich, something that feels like it came from patience. You give samples. People linger. One woman tastes. Old Tom closes her eyes and says, "This tastes like home." You want to tell her it is home? But instead you just nod. You trade cheese for thread oil and a pair of soft wool stockings. You sell one wheel outright to a tanner with surprisingly refined taste. Winterborn. You keep tucked in the basket wrapped in waxed linen. You don't unwrap it. Not yet. Not here. On the way home, the clouds break and sunlight pours across the hills like melted butter. You pause, breathe it in. Everything smells like thaw mud and moss and the ghost of flowers. A wheel of cheese feels heavier in your arms now. More than food. More than trade. It's time. Preserved. You think of all the seasons in your cellar. The soft young cheeses of spring, eager and squeaky. The rich summer wheels that practically melt when you slice them. The autumn rounds dense and sharp, speckled with the dust of fading leaves. And the winter survivors. The ones that endure, tough and deepen. Each one a reflection of the day it was born. Each one, you. You arrive home and place the fresh batch in the cellar beside the old. The cycle continues. You don't say anything out loud, but in your chest you think, this is it. This is how you survive the seasons, one wheel at a time. Spring settles in like a cat curling on your lap, reluctantly at first, then all at once. The air smells of damp soil, young grass, and smoke from fires that don't need to burn all day anymore. The sun lingers longer on the horizon. The village begins to wake. You return to the pasture with bare feet, feeling the grass again between your toes. Bruna naturally finds the one patch of mud deep enough to ruin your morning. Magda is already grazing, and you swear the milk has more body, thicker, richer, like it knows what the long winter cost you. In the cottage, your sister hums as she stirs stew. The shutters are open. The crock by the fire holds new milk warm and waiting. The cat naps beside it now, no longer a threat, but a companion. Even he knows this batch will be a good one. You go to the cellar with a woven basket and a decision. Winterborn. You unwrap it like an old letter. The rind is dry, slightly waxy, but intact. The smell when it hits is stronger than you remembered. Pungent, woody, a little sweet. You sit on the stone step and cut a thin slice, holding your breath. It glows gold inside, dense and creamy with veins of darker ivory threading through like tiny roads. You bite, and the months come, rushing back early, snow's cracked curds, stiff claws wrung with frozen hands, the cellar air, the hiss of the hearth, the silence of deep winter, the pride, the failure, the weight, and now, cheese, real proper proud cheese. You bring the rest upstairs, slice it thin, and call the family to the table. No one waits. You eat it with torn bread and foraged herbs. The youngest coughs and says, "Tastes weird," and you laugh. The older ones chew in silence, eyes closing, nodding slowly. You share the story of this wheel. When it started, how it almost didn't survive. They listen, mouths full. Someone asks if there's more. You shake your head. Only the story. Afterward, you step outside with what's left, one final wedge, and walk it down the lane to a neighbor who's been ill all winter. She answers the door with a blanket around her shoulders and eyes like thinned soup. You give her the cheese without explanation. She nods and closes the door. She doesn't need a speech. She'll understand. Back at the cottage, the fire crackles low. You sit warmed by it. And full, not just from food, but from what food becomes when you've made it with your own hands. What milk turns into when you give it weeks of your life. You stare at the latest batch hanging near the fire, dripping slowly into a basin. The first of the new season, the next chapter, and you wonder, what will this one remember? What jokes, what storms, what moments will it carry inside? You smile, you smile. You'll know soon enough. And if this little journey through curds and cellars made you smile, consider subscribing only if you truly enjoy what I do here. I'd love to have you back for more sleepy stories from long ago. And now, with your belly full, your hands quiet, and the fire gently murmuring at your feet, you sit back and listen to the hush of the cottage. Outside, the last bird has tucked its song away. The wind has died down. Even the cows have settled, just the soft shuffle of straw in the barn, distant and steady. The cellar is full again, not just with food, but with time layers of days and nights and breath and turning and watching. Each wheel of cheese holds the memory of a season, a whisper of you, a taste of your patience. You lean back in your chair and let your eyes fall half closed. The ache in your shoulders feels earned. The quiet in the room is deeper than silence. It's peace. Somewhere in the stillness, a drop of whey falls into a bowl with a soft plink. And you smile, knowing tomorrow the work begins again. But for now, you've done enough. Rest. Let the fire die slowly. Let the air grow cool. And if you dream of cellars lined with golden rounds of cows that behave, of markets full of smiles. Dream of cheese quiet, humble strong, just like you.